Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Avengers number 369, cover dated December 1993, and this is part 5 of the 5 chapters of the Bloodties X-Men Avengers 30th anniversary crossover. And the cover caption here is Allegiance, and what we have is a silver foil embossed cover based on Steve Epting pencils of Exodus facing off against Quicksilver and Crystal, who are holding hands there on the cover. So I'm just going to move this around a little bit so that you can see the light on it and the embossed nature of the cover. It's a pretty cool cover, actually. And let's open this one up to the first page. And what we have here is the helicarrier out over the southernmost tip of Africa, and on board we've got Nick Fury and some of the Avengers who are not already down in Genosha. And so here we've got Scarlet Witch, we have Black Widow, who is team leader while Captain America is on the ground in Genosha. And Nick Fury here gives her readings that he's just received from one of his lieutenants. And basically what Natasha sees on the telemetry reading makes her say, I think at best we pray for the entire world. Okay, so we've got quite the dramatic opening there. And now we have a double page spread. And I'm going to have to move this around on the board so you can get the whole of it there. And what we have is some kind of barrier of shimmering energy which is encasing the city of Hammer Bay, and nothing is able to get through it. And it is obviously the work of this guy here, Exodus. And so we pick up at the end of Uncanny X-Men 307 when Exodus arrives into the tunnels beneath the Citadel of Hammer Bay City. This is the Citadel here. And down in those storm tunnels and sewage tunnels, we have Jean Grey, Scarlet Witch, Crystal, and Quicksilver, and Fabian Cortez, who in the first chapter of the crossover kidnapped Luna. So the title of this final chapter is Of Kith and Kin, and the creative team is over here, Bob Harras, writer, Steve Epting and Jan Duursema, pencilers, and I'll point out Jan Duursema's sections of the oversized issue. Tom Palmer, inker throughout, Mike Rockwitz, colorist, and Bill Oakley, letterer. So let's see what occurs next. So Cortez there, looking to be protected from Exodus, and then Quicksilver racing to see if he can grab his daughter, but he is attacked by Exodus, who has sonic powers, which are not quite defined yet for us, the readers, but he seems to be able to do quite a bit with them. And then he alights and says to Fabian Cortez here, I say, this day you die. And it looks like he means business. So great art here by Steve Epting. I like his dynamic penciling. And of course Tom Palmer, a veteran inker, the man who inked Neil Adams on his X-Men run, and also Adams's work on the Avengers. And of course Tom Palmer, the inker over John Buscema, when he did a recent, so to speak, in the 80s run on the Avengers, a classic run with Roger Stern as writer. And what I discern from Epting's pencils is quite a bit of John Buscema influence, and it's very attractive to me. So let's continue with the story. And here we have Exodus use his sonic powers to take over Cortez's motor functions and take Luna from him, and then he blasts him, and it pretty much looks like Cortez is dead. That's what Crystal thinks anyway. You've had your pound of flesh murderer She addresses Exodus and asks for her child back. But Exodus isn't going to give Luna hand her over to them. And instead he says, "The new dawn, as Cortez so poetically put it, Magnuson, to Quicksilver, as Magneto would have wanted, this nation will pay for its sins, as most assuredly will all of you." So Exodus has punishment on his mind for Genosha and everyone on it. Now at this point, page 8, we have Duursema coming on board for a series of about 8 to 10 pages of pencils. So I'll point out when we go back to Epting. So Epting opens the issue, and after this section by Duursema, he comes back for the middle and end part of the issue. So we've got Trish Tilby, who's been in Genosha for the duration of the crossover, reporting on the devastation in Hammer Bay. And we've got the X-Men rescuing humans here in the background. And we have this little conversation between Gambit and an arrested mutate who was slaughtering humans. And the mutate says to him, "You call yourself a mutant, boy?" And Gambit responds, among other things. And the mutate says, "Then how could you have stopped us? Those flat scans enslaved us. They owned us, body and soul, and respected neither." And Gambit says, "I feel for you, but it don't excuse cold-blooded murder." And the guy responds, "So you say, but you aren't Genoshan. You don't know what it was like. Cortez was right. Death to all humans, death to all flat scan lovers." Gambit just responds dryly, catchy. So there is this debate that runs through the issue in terms of what kind of response is moral and warranted if one is oppressed and violently oppressed, and if one's human rights and civil rights are ignored or discarded. What right do you have to respond to that with violence up to the point of killing or murdering your oppressors? And we'll see Professor X's answer to all of that at the conclusion of the issue. But it's raised here in this little conversation between Gambit and the captured mutate. So then, finally, in this 5-part crossover, we get the Avengers arriving on the scene to team up with the X-Men. So they have a bit of history, the two teams, and Cyclops says to Captain America, "We'd heard you were on the island. Since the Avengers didn't get involved in the first Genoshan crisis," and Ralph Macchio explains that as a reference to the Extinction Agenda, "I assume Luna's kidnapping brought you here." And Captain America says, "It was the catalyst, yes, Cyclops, but don't think that mutants have the market cornered on moral outrage over what's happened here. We're here to help." So then we get a little bit of flirting here between Gambit and Cersei, and Cersei admits that the fight with Exodus took a lot out of her. We have some information coming here from Black Knight that Crystal and Scarlet Witch took off to find Luna with both Exodus and Cortez loose. He suggests that they find them fast. So Storm here makes the point that she won't pretend to X-Men and Avengers that theirs has been a happy association. She says, "But if there ever was a time to put away past bitterness, I would suggest now is certainly that time." And she's likely referring back to the X-Men, the previous X-Men Avengers crossover, which featured Mark Silvestri's first work on the X-Men characters before he took over as regular penciler on the X-Men, the main X-Men title back in 1987. So she says, "A child links us to one another. Her very existence serves as a reminder that our histories are not as disparate as we would first believe. The X-Men were formed to fight injustice, as were the Avengers. To save Luna, to stop the bloodshed, and save the other victims of this cruel war, I say we join forces and end this madness." And Captain America responds, "As I said, Storm, we're here to help. First thing to do is check out the barrier, so this energy barrier." And Storm agrees. So interesting here, like putting the two teams together on their 30th anniversary, and Storm making the point that although they haven't always seen eye to eye with the X-Men sometimes being outlaws, they are here in this situation of civil war and human mutant genocide both teams to help and bring some peace to the island. So War Machine and Storm go to investigate the barrier covering the island. War Machine foolhardily goes to investigate and doing so shorts out all the systems of his armor. So he's plummeting to Hammer Bay, down to the water, and Storm grabs him. And she discovers that her own mutant powers aren't under her full control in that level of proximity to the energy barrier. So they wonder about it. War Machine makes the point that his sensors detected nothing, and Storm concludes that the barrier is sonic in nature. A concentrated telekinetic manifestation would not show up on conventional scanners, she says, but it could very well interfere with my weather powers. And Black Knight makes the point, so Exodus is a telekinetic. That fits with what Cersei felt. So they're putting it together in terms of what Exodus's power set might be, and of course that's key to developing a strategy to defeat him. And then Professor X manifests telepathically and calls to his X-Men to come at once. So the Avengers 2 take off towards the Professor's coordinates that he communicates to Cyclops and the other X-Men. So but Cyclops tells Iceman and Revanche to stay behind and tend to the wounded, and then we get this little character bit where Iceman is a bit miffed, and Gambit asks him why, and he says, it's just that sometimes Scott treats me like I was still a 16-year-old snowhead from Long Island. He says he'll get over it. I mean, these people do need help. Just bring Hank and the Professor back in one piece, okay, Gambit? And Gambit says he'll most certainly try. So here we are, we're back to Steve Epting, and this is a really nice double-page half spread by Epting. I really like the work here on Beast, US agent, Professor X here, shielding a mutate child, and they're cornered in this detention center, which the narrative caption makes plain, in this facility so disingenuously called a mutate detention center. It stinks of filth, of blood and disease, of cruelty and indifference. And if Charles Xavier has never known despair, he surely knows it now because of this place and all it represents. It's effectively a concentration camp for mutates, and you can see that made plain here. They've got the numbers tattooed on their, in this case, on the forehead of this malnourished mutate, and you know the parallels to the death camps in World War II, the Nazi death camps, is pretty much explicit. And so we have the heroes here getting ready to go down swinging, and they're going to need the arrival of a cavalry of some sorts, and here they are. So this is quite a cool anchor image of finally a proper team up between the X-Men and the Avengers. Really, really great art here. Dynamic, powerful by Steve Epting, inked by Tom Palmer. Excellent shot of a leaping Black Knight here. Great shot of Cyclops. Captain America looks really cool here. Rogue looks like she's really flying at speed here. Yeah, great. Gambit looks good too. So, Archangel attacks with his razor-tipped wing blades, takes out these magistrates' weapons, and Rogue 2 takes out the flyers. That's pretty cool. Bishop getting in on the action. Storm, Black Knight, really nice action sequence here. Tremendous art, great storytelling, really good stuff. Now just get past, there's lots of pages of advertisement here for upcoming series from Marvel, so we'll skip that for the sake of this review. Another really cool page of action here. Gambit throwing his kinetically charged cards, of course. Cersei rushing into action, taking out these magistrates. Great fighting going on here with Beast and Captain America, US agent. This is pretty cool stuff. And all of the combined efforts of the X-Men and Avengers, naturally enough, result in the Genoshan magistrates pulling back. So, job done. And then it's a rescue operation where we've got the Flyers taking the most wounded mutates to the campsite where they'll receive medical attention. And then Storm fills the Professor in on what's going on in the sky, that it's a barrier, the work of Exodus. So Professor X here thinks Exodus. So the first time he met him was in Uncanny X-Men 304, The Return of Magneto. And he says here, so he has come in Magnus's stead. Tell me, where is Jean? So the Professor is filled in on that in terms of Jean being with Quicksilver, Wanda and Crystal, Magneto's family, he makes the point, and no one's heard from them. I don't like this, Storm. He says something's terribly wrong. Then Rogue is coming back for some more injured mutates, and then suddenly she's attacked, and the Professor felt the attack before it happened. It's you he wants as well, beware. But she's attacked there, and then we catch back up with Exodus in the storm tunnel, or the sewer beneath the Citadel. And he says, alas, poor Rogue, Magnus truly cared for her, you realise, but in the end she, like all the others, turned against him, and thus she, like the unfortunate Cortez, must pay the bitter price for her betrayal. So whatever you did there was intended to kill. Quicksilver, enraged, says, tell me, Exodus, have you ever thought for yourself, or do you enjoy mouthing the words of a mindless vegetable, in reference to his own father? And this annoys Exodus, so he attacks Quicksilver, speeding up his metabolic rate. And of course, so Quicksilver's in agony here. Crystal demands that he stop it, but look, Exodus isn't going to stop anything. And basically, he begins to reveal more about his plan, how millions of others will be testament to the death of, or will be testament to Magneto's suffering after his family rejecting him and forsaking Magneto. So Jean asks the obvious question, what does he have planned? And then we switch back to the helicarrier over the sea and outside this sonic barrier, and we have Vision here putting things together. The latest report suggests that the barrier has reduced in size 14.6% since its materialization, and that this constriction is continuing at an accelerated rate. So Giant Man says, good Lord, Vision, do you know what this could mean? And Vision says, of course, the field is not merely a barrier but a weapon, one meant to crush the entire island, nation and all its inhabitants. So that's how Exodus is planned for millions to die, as a testament to Magneto's suffering. And then we switch back to Hammer Bay. Rogue survived Exodus's attack. She's still breathing, but here he is. He's come up on the surface, and he has his prisoners in his control. So we've got the Avengers here and the X-Men facing off against him. And Storm says, so the player reveals himself in the flesh. He is holding Jean and the others in thrall. I would urge extreme caution. And Captain America concurs. You won't get an argument from me, Storm, he says. Cersei, everyone, hold back. We're dealing with an unknown quantity here. So they're going to need a proper strategy if they're going to defeat Exodus. So it's that point in the story where he's got to deliver a big speech. Hear me, all gathered here, and know that Magneto has fallen in battle. And we'll skip to the end. Hear me, mutates, slay the flat scan trash that dared enslave you, and you shall be spared Magneto's wrath, for you are ever in his thoughts. So everybody concur. Well, Captain America thinks he's insane, but Professor X says no, he's not. He is a boy seeking to fill the shoes of a giant, and that may be the key to our salvation. So Professor X discerns a weakness in Exodus, lack of experience, over enthusiasm, trying to compensate for his the shoes he's trying to fill, Magneto's. And Exodus says to the mutates, "You gape at me and all, but mutates of Genosha, I say unto you, time is running out, kinsman. Take the glory road, slay the humans." So now the Avengers and the X-Men have two problems. They've got to pacify the mutates, and they've got to deal with Exodus. So, Professor X here says that the humans have to be protected from, the human Genoshians have to be protected from the mutates. And Black Knight asks, well, what about Crystal and the others? But Professor X is thinking all the time that that everything might be to their advantage. So Captain America says here, he asks Xavier, is Exodus telepathically controlling the mob? And Professor X says, to a degree, yes. And Captain America responds, then I suggest we fight a two-front battle. One group stops the mutates and prevents a bloodbath, and the others take Exodus down. Okay, so that's the plan. And Professor X agrees and says to Cyclops, divide the teams as you wish, but the mutates must remain diverted by our attack. So Professor X defers to Cyclops for the strategy of the team division, and these are the teams we get. So we've got USA Agent, Beast, Iceman, Cersei, and Revanche, keeping the mutates away from killing the humans. And so we see that play out here. We've got Beast and Iceman back in action together. They're going up against this mutate pile driver, a guy that must have been from the ore smelting mines, ore processing plants. So he's a tough guy to take down. No success yet. Great anchor image here of the combined X-Men and Avengers leaping into action. Nice work by Epting and Palmer. And so we see that fight continue. Then we have these guys, the Unforgiven, show up. They were formerly Fabian Cortez's bodyguard, but they've switched allegiance to Exodus. And Beast isn't impressed. He takes this guy out with a well-aimed boot kick to the jaw. That seems to do the trick. But in the meantime, Revanche has been taken down, but she'll live, as Beast concludes there. As I mentioned before, no sign of Psylocke on this adventure. And then we have, this is a great page as well, great anchor image here. And this is the team that's going to take out Exodus. So we've got all the heavy hitters. We've got Captain America, we've got Black Knight, we've got Bishop, Gambit, Cyclops, Storm. And Storm and Cyclops take point and go up against Exodus. Optic blasts, Storm using her weather-wielding powers. And Exodus rebuffs their attack. He blasts them away sonically. But in doing so, he's losing his grip over Crystal, Jean, and the others. But he boasts here, do you still not see? Do you not yet understand? I am Magneto's heir, in spirit and in power. Behold my mighty hand. So he's doing something with the sky, with the energy net in the sky. So they see that here. And right, the sky is on fire. It's looking pretty bad in Hammer Bay. And Exodus says here, you see, Genoshians, I'm Homo sapien superior. I'm no charlatan like the unfortunate Cortez. No, I truly offer a new way for the followers of Magneto. I am the way. And Black Knight here is getting it together again. Just keep talking, he says, just a little longer. We've got Captain America conferring with Cyclops. The Knight's moving in, he says. He's going to attack. Cyclops says he doesn't stand a chance alone. But Professor X makes the point. He's not alone, Cyclops. I'm with him every step of the way. So here we go. This is the move to take down Exodus. So he's there, exultant, And just at the moment, like it looks like he's going to kill Luna, Professor X lashes out with a sonic blast, catches Exodus full in the face. He's got the wind knocked out of him. Very good, Xavier, but you see, I was expecting it, but he wasn't expecting Black Knight coming in from behind, who delivers the coup de grace with his neural sword, overloading Exodus's already shocked nervous system. It's a quite cool action scene here. Look at the angle on Luna here, as she's tossed in the air by Exodus, but caught deftly by Black Knight. So cool. And then Jean goes in for the attack, so she's freed from Exodus's sonic control as he's knocked out, and she goes in for the attack too. So mother and daughter reunited, and then we've got like picking up the pieces in Hammer Bay City, and Professor X delivers a big speech, and this is kind of what the theme of the crossover and the race war in Genosha kind of boils down to, in respect of Professor X's kind of liberal humanist perspective on it, where he says, "Hear me, mutates. Great wrong has been done to you. Basic human rights, which is every being's privilege, were denied you for far, far too long. That no one repudiates. But what you've done here is equally wrong. Oppression is no excuse for vengeance, for murder. I wonder, does the death of innocent people, cut down on the streets as they flee, free you? I think not. And why are they to be killed? For the mere fact that they are human? How like your oppressors you've become. And this is your leader, a zealot who calls for the slaughter of little children? Where's the glory in that? Where's the humanity? And where finally is your great moral victory?" So they look, the mutates, like they've got nothing to say in return to Professor X's impassioned speech. But we will see that someone does have something to say in return to it on the very last page, but we'll get to that very soon. So here's the thing that kind of annoyed me when I was rereading this in preparation for the review, and it was, why didn't somebody take care of Exodus, when he was subdued? Why not do something about ensuring that he couldn't do what he's doing right now, which is getting up again and basically leaving and attacking Quicksilver as he pulls out of Hammer Bay? And basically he tells them, like, you know, you've won this battle, but he's going to go back and he's going to prepare for another move in the ongoing war. He says, I represent the next generation of our people, Xavier, and yours is passing, old man. I will be their voice. So really, look, he should have been imprisoned. He should have been shut down so that he couldn't do this. And that's a massive oversight, in my view, on the part of Cyclops and Captain America even. Like, where's their brains in this? Of course, the reason for this is Bob Harras and the way he's written it, and the reason, of course, is the villain has to get away, you know, for another day in comics in the future. But in the story, it just doesn't make sense to me that they wouldn't have, figuratively speaking, tied him up. Yes? Let me know what you think about that in the comments. And here we have Quicksilver. There's a whole question as to whether he's dead or not. And Black Knight, who has been a love rival of Quicksilver's, who has had a kind of flirtatious relationship with Crystal, goes in to give Quicksilver mouth to mouth. And Quicksilver, it looks like he's dead. And Black Knight looks despairing about what's happened. But turn the page. No, he survived. And he comes back to life. And he says, Exodus, he's got a sense of humor. He says, Exodus seems to have taken a great dislike to me. I'm honored. That's pretty funny. And then, you know, he gets a hug from his daughter there. and it's our big happy ending to the crossover and Luna's kidnapping. All's well that ends well, and a husband and wife and a family reunited. And Black Knight says, you know, when Crystal thanks him, "Don't mention it, Chris. That's what friends are for." So no longer a love rival to Quicksilver. And then I really like this contemplative scene with Captain America and Professor X talking and looking out over the bay towards Hammer Bay City. And I like the helicarrier just hovering there with the sun setting. And Captain America says, "A beautiful sight, despite it all, eh, Charles? The helicarrier will be in position in an hour, you know." The Black Widow says they'll begin beaming down relief supplies at the rendezvous point as soon as possible. So Professor X is satisfied. Good, they're sorely needed. Once people have food in their bellies again, perhaps the process of healing can begin. But here's Jenny Ransom, and she's a character that first showed up in Uncanny X-Men 235, and she underwent partially about 90% or 80% the mutate process, and she's been a recurring character in relation to old Genoshan storylines, and she has a bone to pick with Professor X and his point of view. "Cliches from you, Professor?" she asks rhetorically. Not exactly what one would expect from a man with such a reputation for eloquence, but then your rep for honesty seems equally exaggerated. And Captain America's like, "Wait a minute." And Professor X says, "No, let Jenny have her say." And she makes the point here. "You made a pretty speech to the mutates, sir, about morality and brotherhood to people who've suffered greatly because of who they are. I just wonder how you can preach to others while you hide the fact you're a mutant from the world. There's a word for that: hypocrisy." So Professor X gives his response. He says, "In the beginning, I thought it best to conceal the truth in order to help my X-Men. As an advocate for mutants who seemed human, I believed I acted as a bridge between our peoples. I thought I was right, but those were simpler times, and I cannot honestly say I'm so sure anymore." And Captain America concludes that it is an issue of Avengers after all. "Charles, in a world where we continuously find reasons to hate and kill one another, who can ever be sure?" So, quite the resolution, quite the conclusion to this X-Men Avengers crossover. And finally, in this last chapter, the X-Men and Avengers teaming up. And here there's a editorial note by Ralph Macchio, where he talks about how they needed some additional help, which didn't make it into the credits for this issue. So there was other folks involved. Don Hudson, last minute ink assists, so assisting Tom Palmer, Joe Andriani, Chris Matheson, Pat Garrahy for their assistant coloring. So they needed to put some additional people into the mix in order to get the issue out on time, out to the printers on time. So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Avengers 369, the conclusion to the Bloodties 30th anniversary X-Men Avengers crossover. If you liked the video, please like it on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.